In 1917, the United States entered World War I, interestingly enough, a major global event. 3, and probably the most important, the gospel was preached to the entire world. Jesus said in Matthew 24:14, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached into all the world, and then the end will come. The Gideons said by 1917, the gospel had been translated into every known tongue on earth. Jesus said the gospel of the kingdom would go through all the earth, and then the end would come. What you don't know and what you weren't taught in school was one of the reasons why Columbus went to the New World. Number one, of course, was to get gold and riches for Queen Isabella of Spain. That was one of the reasons why he was funded for his trip. Internally, they dug up a document in 1892 where he wrote that my exploration into the New World will bring the second coming of Christ. One of his internal motivations was he understood Matthew 24. This gospel of the kingdom will go to all the world, and then the end will come. He felt by exporting the gospel from Spain, which is a Catholic country, he would be the catalyst that would actually trip the wire for the second coming of Christ to happen. That was his personal internal motivation, which very few people know. He couldn't have sold that trip to Isabella and Ferdinand with that idea. Oh, there's gold and riches and land and territory and slaves and all kinds of goodies over there. Internally, I'm going to bring about the second coming of Christ. You can look it up. So this is a very, very special time. This is a time that's already gone. That means we're overdue for the second coming of Christ. We're overdue. That means it can happen any day, any time. And for all we know, might have already occurred. Jesus was 33 years old and nobody knew what was going on. He lived 33 years and nobody got a clue. Died alone. Today is the time of the second coming. End of the 2,000-year period of indemnity for worldwide Christianity. Realization of the foundation for the 3 blessings of the worldwide level. Pastor Frank talked about that in the consummation of human history. One of the signs that you know you're in the last days and the second coming of Christ is going to happen, you see the 3 blessings being fulfilled on a global scale. You see science and technology. You see on the individual level, be fruitful, multiply, have dominion. You see that beginning to happen. Even with all the hell going on earth, underneath that is actually you're seeing the 3 blessings being realized on a global scale, which is a dead sign for the second coming of Christ. Now, Christ's authority. He who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I myself conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear. From God and Jesus. Christ's authority comes from God and Jesus. The second coming comes from that authority. Remember, we talked about Jesus is transferring all of his authority. His messiahship is going to another person. And now, we will go into the last part. You see, the first Adam and the last Adam are the same, the tree of life. Why was there a sword placed across the tree of life? The tree of life, we know, was Adam in perfection. What's the one thing no one's been able to accomplish in all the history of mankind? Perfection itself, to become a tree of life. There's no tree of life. The only guy that ever did it was Jesus. Achieved the tree of life, perfection centered on God. That's why there's a sword across the tree of life, barring access to the tree, because we can't get rid of our own sin. In the second coming, though, it says in 22:14, blessed are they that wash their robes, so they shall have the right to the tree of life. There will be access to the tree of life, and that comes with the second coming of Christ. Second coming of Christ, Christ finally lifts that final veil and allows all of humanity to rush to the tree of life and become the tree of life. Perfection will be possible. Remember, be fruitful, multiply, dominion. That's God's first will from the very beginning. It applies today. It's the same thing. The Messiah will come to accomplish the 3 blessings on earth. Now, last section, and we'll wrap it up. It's been a long day. It's hot. I understand that. And I'm cutting a lot of stuff out of here. Everybody tracking with me so far? Everybody good? You getting this, Barbie? It's a lot, isn't it? Yep. Where will Christ return? We answered how. On earth with a new name. When? Sometime after 1917. Deadlock. historically the Messiah has to appear in that time frame. Jesus appeared at that exact time frame 2,000 years after Jacob and his 12 sons and 70 kinsmen. Likewise, those parallels are repeating themselves. We saw that. It's chronological. You can set your clock by it. Messiah has to come. Where will Christ return? The final chapter. Among the Jewish people? Maybe not. Most Christians expect that Christ will come again amongst the Jewish people based on passages such as Revelation 7:4, Matthew 10:23, and Matthew 16:28. However, I heard the number of them which were sealed, 144,000, the tribes of the children of Israel. Ye shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man be come, and there will be some standing here which shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Didn't happen. Jesus was crucified. There was no kingdom. No kingdom came. Jesus said this. He said a lot of things, giving the disciples a feeling of imminency. Don't worry. Even though they can destroy your body, fear God who can destroy body and soul in hell. Don't worry. I'm coming back really soon. He knew they were going to go through tremendous persecution. He had to give them this pregnant expectation of imminency to enable them to go through the destruction under the Romans in Jerusalem and in Israel, and then the eventual persecution in Rome. Christians, ever since the beginning, have always had a sense of imminency that Christ could come any time. Always, even to this day. Do not presume to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father, for I tell you, God is able to, from these stones, to raise up children to Abraham. So the physical location that Jesus comes back to doesn't necessarily have to be Israel. Romans 9:6, for not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel. Just because you might be Jewish or from Israel doesn't necessarily mean you're chosen. He says God can raise up children of Abraham from these stones. It's a matter of heart. It's a matter of your allegiance to God and how humble you are to God's will, that you're a child of God, that you're in God's grace and God's fellowship. Sometimes the worst, most hardened criminals have a radical change of heart and become champions for God. It's a matter of heart and mind. So, on this matter, Jesus taught in the parable of the vineyard, and I don't have my Bible. Anyway, in the parable of the vineyard, Jesus finishes up in verse 43 with the statement, therefore the kingdom of heaven shall be taken from you. Now he's selling this story to scribes and Pharisees, telling them about the fact that over the years, God has sent prophets and seers and holy men to them that they've categorically, time after time, rejected and either killed or thrown out of their country. And finally, Jesus ends that parable with, therefore, the kingdom of heaven shall be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits of it. A nation, specifically a geographical location. It's not Israel. Not to Israel. Jesus clearly conveyed that he would not come again to the people who persecuted him. God will take away the mission previously entrusted to them and give it to another people who can produce its fruits upon Christ's return. So the chosen people after the crucifixion are now the Christians, have taken up the mantle from Christ. They are now the chosen people. So, not among the Jewish people, unfortunately. God still loves the Jews, and the Jews honestly have no better friend on earth than Christians, actually. Christians are very united with Israel right now, very strong united. In fact, Israel is allowing Paul Crouch and the 700 Club to broadcast in Israel now. They have satellite transmission in Israel with the blessing of the government. Very interesting. Very interesting development. So, final chapter. Which nation is the one to which Christ will return? We have to determine this. We already realized how. On earth with a new name. When? Sometime after 1917. Where? How can we know? Jesus was a Jew that came to Jews upon the foundation of the 2,000-year preparation of Judaism to a Jewish nation. Statement of historical fact. That's all. Likewise, it makes sense that the Lord at the Second Advent comes as a Christian who will come to Christians on the foundation of the 2,000-year preparation of Christianity to a Christian nation. It makes kind of logical sense. Revelation 7:2. We have to determine, again, what nation is this? Let's determine a direction first. Then I saw another angel ascend from the rising of the sun with the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and sea, saying, hurt not the earth, etc., etc., etc. 44,000. The rising of the sun. I saw an angel ascend from the rising of the sun. Where does the sun rise from? The east. The east. A little clue, a little breadcrumb in the forest. Right? Matthew 24:27. Very, very interesting. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines to the west, so shall also be the coming of the Son of Man. Two tiny little clues. As the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so shall be the coming. He didn't say from north to south. He didn't say from west to east, south to north, east to west. From the east. So number one, we have an eastern nation that the Messiah has to come to. Who then are the likely candidates? Let's take a look at some candidates, some large candidates. China. Perfect. Wow. Great big country. How many billions? 1 billion people maybe, right? 1 billion folks. You think you'd be able to find a Messiah in 1 billion people, right? China historically has been Confucian, and in more recent times has been forcibly taken over by communism, 1948, thereby rendering it unusable by God as a launching site for a successful messianic mission. There's no foundation for a Christian Messiah in China. And it's been taken over by communism, anti-God ideology. What underlies the Chinese government and ideology is Maoism, which is connected to Marxism, which says there is no God. Religion is the opiate of the people. Sorry. Love the Chinese folks, but not a launching pad for messianic mission. So they're out of the picture. Japan. Wow. Now that's something to think about. Manufacturing giant. Got 22% of our car market. Very industrious people, very proper people, a deep cultural history, foundation of dignity and honor. However, Japan historically has been Shinto and Buddhist. In 1910, Japan annexed Korea and committed brutal atrocities against the Christian population there until the end of World War II. This, plus the fact that there is only a 1% Christian foundation in Japan, make it ineligible as well to be a nation in which God could begin the providence of the Second Advent. Very unlikely. Sorry. Love the Japanese folks. However, not a candidate. India. Perfect, of course. 1 billion people. You should be able to extract a Messiah from 1 billion people, right? Nah, Hindu. Sorry, ain't gonna happen. There's no significant Christian population to begin a messianic mission there. The Messiah would be digging through concrete in India. It'd be very difficult. Thank you, Jesus. Korea? What? Korea? Little Korea? You mean that little country that's kind of hanging out the end of China? How can it be? There's much evidence to suggest that Korea would be the most logical and probable site in the East to begin the providence of the Second Advent. Idle boast. Let's see. Well, this is 1984. This is a newspaper I got somewhere along the road, a Forerunner newspaper. It says here, evangelical leaders around the world know how fast Korean churches are growing. They want to know why, especially leaders in less responsive countries like Japan. What's behind the Korean boom? The obvious answer is the Holy Spirit, says Southern Baptist missionary Milton Womack, an associate to the Foreign Mission Board's director for East Asia. He believes the country is experiencing an ongoing spiritual revival that is part of God's plan and cannot be explained in non-spiritual terms. Dr. Paul Yonggi Cho has the largest church on earth, 350,000 members. He has 4 Sunday services, usually, of 50,000 plus members. This is in 1884. I don't know what he's doing now. Pope John Paul visited Yeouido Island in Korea in 1989. This was the result. 1 million people in Yoedo Island to see the Pope. In Kurt Cox's Victory Through Persecution, the following was said: the Korean church has set a pattern of perennial revival to which the Church Universal looks with wonder and amazement. When I visited Korea years ago, I was astounded to find Christians getting up 2 hours before daylight and gathering in their churches for prayer, Bible study, and testimony. The scenes I witnessed there have stayed with me through the years and have had a great impact on my personal spiritual life. It's refreshing to note that the spirit of revival still prevails in Korea and that the work of God there continues unabated. At the alarming rate of spiritual decline in the West, it is conceivable that God is getting Koreans ready to serve as missionaries to the Western Church. For years, the flow of missionaries was from west to east, but it is possible that in the providence of God, that may be reversed in the future. In any event, the Korean church serves as a beacon of spiritual light in a sea of darkness. Who said that? Billy Graham said that in 1972. So in 1972, this is just, 30 years after the Korean War, right? 20 years after the Korean War. There were still churches in Korea that were bombed out that people were still meeting in. Even bombed out, they saw it as the church of God. That's where God lives. Even bombed out, God still lives there. That's what made such an impression on him. Anyway, that Korean flag, even the Korean flag is interesting. The parts of the Korean flag correspond to heaven, fire, earth, water, the duality of God. The national flower of Korea is called the mugunghwa, or the rose of Sharon. In the Old Testament, the rose of Sharon is the name for God. The ancient name of Korea is Chosen. Chosen. The Korean characters are Chosen. I'll skip this. 10 world worst dictators. This is when Kim Jong-il was the leader of Korea. Was the worst on civil liberties and political rights. Again, Korea is divided at the 38th parallel between the most vicious form of communism on earth. It's a complete totalitarian regime, and to the south, absolute democratic plurality. There's every kind of religion, every kind of ideology. There's massive economic prosperity. The phone you've got in your pocket more than likely was made in Korea. Chances are very good. Biggest shipbuilder on earth. This is a picture of Korea at night from a satellite. Very interesting. The entire north, they don't have enough fuel to run electricity at night. So they put the lights out at night. Down the south, capitalism. They got plenty of money and plenty of industry in the south because it's a dictatorial, anti-God, atheistic regime in the north. This is where the Cain-Abel struggle on the world level is happening right now in the world, at the 38th parallel. There's been messianic prophecies. There was a book written many years ago, 400 or 500 years ago, called the Chungam Nak, where they believe that the Messiah would return to their country. So this is a common underpinning in Korean culture. They've always felt they had a sense of chosenness, and that the one who would change the world would actually come to their country. I had a great picture of Billy Graham in here. Billy Graham brought 1 million people himself to Yoedo Island several years ago in the 80s. So, like the Judaism of Jesus' day and the contemporary Christian church, they value institution and ceremony over the purity of original faith. The same situation that occurred 2,000 years ago, which prohibited the Jewish people from accepting Jesus, is happening now in the Christian world. More focus on external religious observance and external observances rather than an internal change. So Christians may end up in this time, much like the Jews of 2,000 years ago, they will be among the first that will not recognize the Messiah when he comes and possibly even persecute him. The very people that were prepared to receive Jesus 2,000 years ago were the very ones that led the charge to have him killed. And likewise, if Christians aren't careful, like Jesus said, many will come to me saying, did we not do many wonderful works in your name? And he'll say, depart from me, I never knew you. In this day, we have to be very, very careful and really have our antennas up for how, when, and where the Messiah will come. So I'm going to leave it right there. I think we've seen quite a bit. There's many more slides. Again, we're doing a flyover of divine principle, really. We're trying to cram something that, to do the divine principle justice, really takes at least 21 days to really do it justice. And we're trying to compress it to get as much information out as quickly as we possibly can. So again, this is a real brief introduction. This is not much more than an introduction to the divine principle, and I really hope that you've gotten something out of this. This has been productive for you. I know it's hot. It's been a long day, but there you have it. We'll leave it right there at the second half, and I encourage you very much to continue studying. There are many, many more lectures. We're touching on the biggest topics in this one-day seminar. But there's many, many other subtopics and things that are very enriching for your personal life. So we'll leave it right there. Thank you very much for coming. Hit that camera.